Explorers from Europe arrive in Wisconsin. We're going to continue on with exploring across our timeline how the fur trade got its start in Wisconsin specifically. So we know that eventually Europeans started to arrive in Wisconsin, and it wasn't the greatest. A lot of Indians and Native people had to do a lot of adapting, and there wasn't always great adapting, right? We know that a lot of the times there was some fighting and there were some bad things happening. So let's see what happens as more explorers start traveling to Wisconsin. That's our main question on this page. How did explorers travel to Wisconsin? So this page reads, some historians believe that explorers such as John Nicolet may have traveled with some Huron Indians by canoe through the Straits of Mackinac. The straits connected to Lake Huron with Lake Michigan. Indian peoples living in Wisconsin in the 1600s traveled on foot and by canoe. They had no horses or cars or trucks. So there were no highways, motor vehicles, or stoplights here when people from Europe began exploring the area. However, the Midwest was rich in lakes and rivers that were used like water highways. Indian peoples had been traveling these water highways for thousands of years by the time the first explorers from Europe arrived. So this image on this page, the fur trade, exploration, and water routes, is a really good job at showing you some of those routes. So I remember on the map, the other page, a lot of those lodges and places people were staying were right along this water highway. So this captions, rivers in Wisconsin link the Great Lakes with the Mississippi River. After traveling south from Green Bay on the Fox River, Indian people then carried their canoes and goods overland a short distance to reach the Wisconsin River. They traveled the Wisconsin River until it flowed into the Mississippi near Prairie du Chien. With your finger, can you trace that water highway routes yourself? Imagine traveling those distances by canoe about 400 years ago. So obviously this is from a book. We don't need to trace our finger and smudge the screen, but thinking about how far that was 400 years ago by canoe, it probably looks very different than it does today. So I don't know about you. I'm kind of curious about this John Nicolet, this explorer. Let's read a little bit more about him. Who was John Nicolet? Members of the Menominee, Ho-Chunk, and Potawatomi nations met the explorer John Nicolet when he visited them near Green Bay in 1634. Nicolet was born in France. As a young man, he traveled to New France. Today, New France is known as Canada. Nicolet went there to work for a French trading company. He lived with several different Canadian Indian groups and learned their languages and traditions. Nicolet was about 36 years old when he began to explore and travel into new lands where he had never been. He met and made friends with groups of Native people living at a place now called Red Banks near Green Bay. Nicolet traveled by canoe about 700 miles. In these travels, he met many different people. He saw parts of the Midwest that only Indians knew about. After Nicolet's visit, he returned to Canada. Although he wrote notes about his explorations in Wisconsin, none of his records have survived. We know about this trip through the writings of a priest who knew Nicolet. There are no photographs of Nicolet or his explorations because cameras hadn't even been invented. We have a painting here, though, of John Nicolet wearing a robe of Chinese silk when he landed somewhere near Green Bay in 1634. No one's sure what the robe or Nicolet looked like when he arrived, though. This is a painting that was created about 300 years ago. So that is the reading about explorers coming to Wisconsin, and a specific, more popular one, John Nicolet.